Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White, where we discuss and try to fix the issues of the underserved communities here in America. Tonight, we have a very special guest, Mr. C. Nathaniel Brown. C. Nathaniel Brown is an award winning filmmaker, best selling author, and storytelling coach. He's also the founder and CEO of the Atlanta based media and entertainment company, Expected in Entertainment. Began his writing career as a newspaper and magazine reporter, where he spent more than 20 years. In 2009, he merged his writing talents with his visual talents as a photographer and produced his first short film. Since then, the Baltimore native has written, produced, and or directed more than 40 films, ranging from short films, feature films, and documentary films, many on critical topics including mental illness, campus sexual assault, domestic violence, and more. After feeling the impact that the dementia has had on his family, Brown produced a short film called That's My Brother, which depicted a portion of his aunt's and cousin's story. That led to the creation of Remember Me, The Dementia in the African American Community, a documentary that features interviews with people living with dementia, their care partners, dementia researchers, and other dementia experts. The goal of the documentary is to encourage discussion around dementia, remove the stigma of dementia, and inspire lifestyle change as we fight to the end dementia. In addition, Brown wrote Exposing Dementia, Eight Critical Takeaways for African Americans, his 21st book, that also seeks to educate the community about dementia and its impact. The documentary and the book have led to the creation of Expose Dementia Incorporated, a nonprofit organization that will focus on utilizing media and the arts as tools to celebrate those living with dementia, their caregivers, and individuals on the front line of the fight against dementia. It will also create more opportunities to educate and advocate for people in the dementia space. In his spare time, Brown enjoys eating pizza, watching sports and movies, and spending time with family and friends. He also supports several humanitarian causes, including bringing awareness to issues such as mental health, as domestic violence, sex trafficking, and mental health. He resides in Atlanta with his wife of 29 years, Tareya Alexander. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you all Mr. C. Nathaniel Brown. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.
I definitely appreciate you. Is there anything you'd like to add to your bio?
No, I mean, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. It almost sounded like I wrote it.
So, how's your day been? And thank you for coming to the show.
It's my pleasure. It's been a busy day, but it's been a great day. It's always a busy day in my world because there's always 10 projects I'm working on at the same time. So that's a good thing for me. If I didn't have anything to do, that's when you should be concerned.
I hear you. So before we get going, I mean, I just want to ask you this one question.
Sure.
Um, is it that when you moved from Baltimore, is that when you felt your creativity, or were you always a creative guy?
Yeah, always creative, always creative. I tell the joke, but it's a serious truth in this joke that I grew up in a house full of women. And
Oh,
so I didn't have a lot of opportunities to talk. So I found other ways to express myself with writing and creating stories and characters and things like that. And that became, kind of how I just communicated with everyone. So it would be easy for me to write you a note and slip you a note than for me to come out and have a conversation with you. And so that kind of started the early stages of my creativity, watching my mother write poems. And I said, I want to write a poem. And I wrote my first poem. And then it just kind of grew from there, from 4 or 5 years old. Then it elevated once I understood what storytelling was all about as I got older. And then so I would keep, pieces of paper in my pocket and I would write down something. Oh, I'm gonna put this in a book one day. I'm gonna put this in a movie one day. And so that turned out of my pockets into what I used to have as a junk drawer, which
Mhm.
then turned into a big duffel bag, where I still have a lot of those ideas that I wrote, and many of them have ended up in my movies, scripts for television, part of the plays that we're doing now. So they're constantly evolving, but it started a long time ago.
Okay. Well, now you do so many things, and just three things that I would love to focus on, if you don't mind.
Sure.
For this interview, because it's so relative to what we do here in America in Black and White, because we're all about developing and growing communities, and just always loving to shine the light on those that are doing well, but also that are helping in the community.
Yes.
I would first like to start talking about your career as an author. Can you tell us what inspired you to start writing?
Yeah, I think the first thing was watching my mother write. She would always write poetry. That was her main thing. And I wanted to do what she did. And so I started writing poems. That was the first thing I did. Probably wasn't good. One of those poems, the very first one that I wrote, is in the documentary that I did. And I wrote it for my aunt, who was really important to me. She's my godmother. And it was just a real simple poem. But I started writing, those poems as a way for me to write. And then it evolved into, oh, I can write other things. Oh, I can create stories. I can create characters. And so when I got to college, I was, constantly writing all through, my early years and through high school and college. And then I had a class that I took, and my advisor said, you should put these in a book. And I was like, yeah, okay. How do I do that though? And
Right.
so, a few years after that, I wrote a paper in school, and it was called "I Always Put the Seat Down." And so it was really talking about how the women in my life really raised me well. And that was kind of one of the stories I told about making sure I have the seat down. And although it was specific to them, they were teaching me how to live outside of the house as well. And so when I shared that story, he was like, when you write a book, this is what you should call it. I always put the seat down. And so that was my first book. It was a collection of poems called I Always Put the Seat Down. And it dealt a lot with my childhood, different experiences. It was kind of a hodgepodge of different stories. And that kind of opened me up to, wow, I always wanted to be an author. Now I'm an author. Now what? And so, because I had to go through that procedure and process pretty much on my own, I learned how to do it. And then I started teaching other people how to write and publish as well. And so that was the first book. And as you mentioned, my Exposing Dementia book is my 21st book. And I've also helped thousands of people publish their books.
Ooh. But see, that's really a good thing. I mean, that's something that I would love to get to the point of doing as well. That is helping people to write.
Mhm.
Can you share some key milestones in your writing career?
Oh, there's quite a few. So if you go back to the first book, that was probably the first significant milestone. I went to a bookstore for a book signing, and I walk into the bookstore, and my book, and it was during Black History Month, and my book was on display right next to Maya Angelou,
Oh,
Langston
wow.
Hughes, all of these other great Black writers that I admired so much and that I had studied in school and I learned so much about, and to see it on display with theirs, it was like, mama, I made it, I've arrived. And so it just elevated where I was as a writer within myself. Not that somebody else had to validate my writing, but to see it next to people that I admired, and understanding that somebody will pick this up and read it and will have the same impact that Maya Angelou's work had on me, or Langston Hughes' works had on me. And so that kind of became that first milestone that I started looking toward and saying, okay, what else can I do? How can I impact others and so forth? You mentioned my 20 plus years as a newspaper reporter. I wrote a series of articles on this gentleman who was basically living in a one room shack, rats, snakes, spiders, everything. And he was promised a new house from the town that he lived in. But after years and years, everybody forgot about this promise until I started doing these articles. And then once that was exposed, then they built him a brand new house and got him out of that situation that he'd been living in for over a decade.
Oh,
And so I realized again, there's power in my pen, not just to create a story, not just to tell a story, but to have impact. And that's what I'm all about. That's why I call myself an impact storyteller. I don't want to just tell a story. I mean, anybody can do that, but I want to tell a story that's going to have impact. It's going to move somebody, it's going to inspire somebody. And that was a big part of it. So most of my milestones with my writing are directly linked to the impact that it's had.
oh wow. So like for writing this story that actually helped that gentleman out, do you normally or have you as a reporter, had you normally been writing stories that was telling stories of those that were being left behind, that were being repressed in some shape, form, or fashion, or that really needed the help?
Not when I started. When I started, it was just on assignment. So
Okay.
they would say, "Hey, go cover this school board meeting. Go
Mhm,
cover this council meeting. Do
mhm,
this feature on this kid that did something in school." So I was given assignments, but once it got to the point where it was okay, now we need you to go out and find the stories.
mhm.
Then I started seeking the stories that most people won't tell, that most people won't be interested in, because those are the marginalized people like us. Those
Mhm,
are the marginalized communities. Those are the issues that get swept under the rug. And so I
mhm.
took it upon myself to really be interested and engaged in those types of stories. So once I had the opportunity or the ability to find my own stories, that's what I did. And fortunately, I've worked with a lot of great editors at newspapers and magazines who understood that and gave me a little bit of freedom to do that, or assigned me stories where I could explore that a little further.
Oh wow, that's wonderful. So like would you consider the reporting you was doing more like investigative journalism or what do they call it on the news?
Exposes and
Yeah,
things.
some kind of
Yeah,
thing.
so it really was a combination. So over the
Mhm,
course of 20 years, like I said, I've covered pretty much everything. So
mhm,
some of it was just, okay, go to the school board, they're having a budget meeting, find us what's important about these budget talks. So I would have to go and find out, okay, they reduced the funding for music and arts. What does this mean to the community? Or
mhm,
they put an extraordinary absorbent amount of money into one area versus another. What
mhm.
does that mean? So some of it was just finding those little things that not necessarily were dealing with all the other stuff. But then I was a part of investigative teams where we looked at how these plants were affecting the community, and cancer rates are higher in this area where this facility is because of the smoke and the water and all those other things. So it really was a combination of everything. I covered sports. I covered the police beat. So I'm out for accidents and murders and investigations and city council. I covered the Ku Klux Klan meeting one time. I covered a mafia event that was like a community event. So it was just a ton of different experiences, which I think helped me as a creator as well, as a creative, because I've seen so many different areas. And now I can take bits and pieces of different parts of what I experienced, and I can apply them to whether it's a play we're working on, or a movie I'm writing, or a TV show I have an idea for, as well. And then all of those things now, I try to use it in a way that's going to have that impact, like I mentioned.
So how do you approach the process of writing a new book?
It depends. Like I said, I'm always writing, so it could just be, oh, I saw this couple have a conversation. I'll write it and say, this is what I felt while I'm watching them their conversation. not necessarily hearing it, but I can only imagine what they're talking about. And so, or if I see a parent dealing with a child, one of my books is called Baking Pies and Making Love.
Mhm.
And that book is about relationships, how to build and maintain strong relationships, specifically in marriage, but it also applies in friendships and family and things like that. So that conversation with that couple can spur an idea. And then I'll build on that idea and I'll see something else. So that book talks about how all of these components of making a pie, if something is missing out of those ingredients, the pie isn't going to taste the same. So baking pies is kind of a metaphor to building a relationship. What type of things do you need in that relationship? You need communication. You need quality time. You need to understand each other's love languages, all of those things. And so something like that could be just an idea
Mhm.
from seeing something, hearing something, watching
Mhm.
something on television, and now I start developing from there. Same thing with the dementia book. It was doing the documentary on dementia, but now some people might not watch a documentary, but they'll read a book. So let me take some of this information and put it in a book. And so my topics are the same way. I have a basketball book. I have a book on domestic violence. I have a book on dementia. I have a book on relationships. So there are across the board because I'm passionate about so many different topics.
Oh wow. So can you tell me, like, when you write these books and you come up with these different topics, are these topics like that come to your creative space via your mind, or like is it like when you're just observing the everyday people and out in the world that you just get ideas?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. Sometimes I'll just sit and I'll think, you know, of a scenario or a story. And then it's
Mhm.
like, okay, what am I going to do with that? It might become a poem. It might become a short story. It might be, some nonfiction things like, you know what? Here are 5 tips to help you live healthier or whatever it is. But it could be from anything. I usually do an assignment with a lot of my writers, and I'll tell them just go outside, go to the mall, go to the grocery store, and observe things.
Mhm.
Then come back and tell me what you saw, what you experienced, people that caught your eye, the colors that caught your eye, the weather, like whatever it is. And now what do you do with that?
Mhm.
Can you create something with it? Did it spark a conversation? Did it make you come home and ask somebody else a question? So all of those things are important in developing creatively when you're trying to write a book, write a movie, a play, or something like that as well. You just utilize whatever you have at your disposal.
Okay. Um, what themes do you often explore in your writing?
It's endless. um, so there are a couple of things that I'm not necessarily a fan of that
Mhm.
I could write if I had to, but I'm not a horror person. So I'm not
Oh.
gonna really write a horror. Although I've done it, I've done a short film that's kind of a horror.
Mhm.
Um, and that was kind of from a challenge that we had. But a lot of the stuff I do is nonfiction, so it's based on actual experiences, actual people, something that motivated and inspired me. Now I want to do the same for other people. But creatively, it's on a lot of topics that are I'm passionate about. So you mentioned mental health, for example. My producer partner and I are doing a series called the Permission to Feel and Heal series, and
Mhm.
that deals with mental health. So her name is Nate Stubbs. She and I did a play called God Guys, which dealt with mental health issues in Black men. This past weekend, we premiered the female version, which is called God Sis, that deals with mental health in Black women. And so
Nice.
we have a series that we're working on where there are other topics that we're going to address within that framework. So mental health is important. Domestic violence, sexual abuse, a lot of things that are directly related to our community, suicide, things that we don't normally talk about in the Black community like we should. I know
Mhm.
there are conversations starting to be had, but more needs to be done. And so a lot of those topics and issues are the ones that we tend to do creatively to give people a different perspective on it. And now we can have those conversations. Now we can, oh, I didn't know that this happened. Oh, I didn't know this statistic. I didn't know about this. Now we can talk about things that we normally don't talk about. So, although some of them are light, funny, sometimes they're serious, sometimes they're about relationships, but we bring out those issues so that we can now have a conversation.
Now, as you say that, I will tell you, I've made it my goal to try to have at least one mental health professional on the show every week. It started out, I actually had that opportunity, but as of lately, I've been falling short. So, I mean, because you're right about one thing in our community, it seems like mental health is the one thing we don't want to talk about.
Right.
But we're starting to see more and more mental illness, and it's like it looks like it's something that's getting out of control. What do you think with this stigma that we
Yeah.
have in our communities? Why do you think that's so that it's keeping us from not only talking about it but acting appropriately to solve that issue?
Yeah. I will say it's getting better. I think the issue that we had is that we have hundreds of years of mistrust and distrust, the stigmas, not communicating, not talking about it, not knowing where to go. All of those things have compounded for years and years and years. And now we're just like slowly chipping away at it to say, hey, it's okay. I'm in therapy. There's nothing wrong with it. It's helped me. It probably saved a lot of lives that I was in therapy. So
Right,
that's a good thing. So try
right,
it. Go
right.
talk to somebody. We tend to implode a lot,
Yup.
which causes our health issues, which
Yes.
then
Right.
goes to some other area, and then it trickles down to our family and children and their children and so on and so forth. And so we have to do a better job of just chipping away. We can't do it all in one day because, like I said, it's hundreds of years of experience that we're trying to get away from and saying we don't have to do it this way anymore. You know,
Mhm,
there are people that we can go to that we can trust. There are people that look like me who are helping now. You know,
mhm.
whereas before it was like, oh, I'm not going to trust a white man. I'm not going to trust a white woman because, you know, they've oppressed us for all these years. Now, what's your excuse that you can come to me as a counselor? What's your excuse that you can go to somebody else that looks like you? You
Mhm.
can't use that excuse anymore. So the
Exactly.
more we remove excuses, the easier it's going to be to make an improvement, to get rid of that stigma. The more people that stand up and say, you know what? Yes, I'm in therapy. Yes, therapy has helped me. Here are
Mm,
some things that I learned about therapy. You should go and talk to somebody. Don't keep it into yourself. The
mm.
more we do that, the easier it's going to be, because erasing a stigma is hard.
Yes,
It's a
very.
stigma for a reason. And
Mhm,
so we just have to be continuously working on it, not letting it, you know, just die down, but continue to build on it. Once we get a little bit of success in it, let's celebrate that success. Once we
mhm,
see counselors that look like us, let's celebrate them. And it's
mhm,
the same situation with the dementia side of things now. We wouldn't go get checked because we didn't trust who it was. Now
mhm,
there are researchers who are us, looking like us, doing what we're doing, helping the cause. And so the more we can expose that, the better it's going to be for us to remove this stigma. And that's with abuse. We see that now it's a little bit lighter for a victim of sexual abuse, domestic abuse, to come forward to share their story. That wasn't
mhm.
always the case.
Oh, yes, you're right.
So you see what I'm saying? And so as we chip away at these things and we make it easier to have these conversations, the better it's going to be as we remove these excuses, remove the stigma, erase the negative stigmas, and then now replace it with these success stories in books, in
Mhm.
movies, on television, in communities, in podcasts. So that's what we have to do to continue to make a difference.
Wow. That was a whole mouthful, But I want to ask one other follow up to that because I
Sure.
mean, I hope that people are actually getting this message that you're sending. Like when you mentioned earlier about the stigmas when it
Mhm.
came to, let's say, like the dementia situation, because you know, I'm sorry, but I mean, a lot of us have just said in general, my mind, there's nothing wrong with my mind. I'm not
Yeah.
forgetting. There's nothing slipping. What are some of the other things we can do to get people to be a little bit more proactive when it comes to these things?
Yeah, so that's one of the big things that we're working on right now is helping people understand the process. How do you have those conversations, especially if somebody is in denial about what's happening? How do you continue to get them help, so on and so forth? What we've done in the past is, oh, that's just so and so. They just crazy. Don't mind them. That's who they are.
Right.
That's just Uncle so and so. That's but we don't go further than that. And so now it's like we have to first be able to identify that something is wrong. And then what are our next steps? And so while we're doing that on that end, we're also trying to teach about lifestyle changes to prevent those things. Because in the African American community, like most things with diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease, all of those things, it hits the Black community harder than any other group.
Mhm.
And so, in addition to where are we right now? What do we need to do to help somebody? Okay, who do they go to? Contact the Alzheimer's Association. Contact the local health department. Look for
Mhm.
one of these other organizations to begin to walk your way through that process. Then it's okay. We know where we are now. Now we got to go back. How do we prevent it? And since they don't know exactly one thing that says, okay, if you change this, you won't get dementia. It doesn't work that way. But we know that smoking, drinking, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, all of those things impact us. So what we eat, our lifestyle, exercising, um, the fact that we don't sleep as Black people, because we're the
Mhm.
first one to tell you, oh, I sleep when I die. You're gonna die a lot sooner. I promise you, is one of the things that I'm working on personally because
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much sleep impacted so many other things. And so, and I'm talking about in the past year and a half that I'm learning. So
Yeah.
I'm actively trying to sleep
Yes. You
because
know,
it's so important.
and when you say that, I mean, I have to give kudos to that because I'm definitely guilty of that. And I know when I'm working on like 5 projects
Yep.
and it's sitting here and it's like I'm just going and I'm just doing, and that's from writing to everything else in business. And it's like, where'd the time go? Now it's
Mhm.
4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes. Yes.
you know?
Exactly. So there are a couple of studies that I'm assisting with, and one is a sleep study. And in short, it says that you should be sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night. Most of us can't. We just can't. But it's important because of what happens while you're asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain basically flushes the negative things that are building up while you're sleeping.
Right.
If it doesn't, that's when things build up in your brain, which can cause blood cells to die, a buildup of blood cells, neurons not connecting, like all of these things just from not sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one of those areas. So you read in my bio about me loving pizza.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that knows me know how much I love pizza. I could eat pizza every day of the week. That's how much I love it. But I
Okay.
know I can't. You
Right.
understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So everything in moderation, as they say. So I've cut back on the amount of pizza I eat on a regular basis. I'm gonna have my pizza. Don't get me confused. I'm gonna eat me some pizza, but I'm just not gonna do it at the rate that I did when I didn't understand how it impacted me.
Right.
Same thing with sleep. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with exercise. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with socialization, which is a big part of it. So all of those things that we know, we have to do a better job of teaching and educating people on it so that they can implement it into their lives and then pass it down from generation to generation. And
Right.
that's where we create that generational wealth starting without generational health.
Hmm. Oh wow. So, how do you balance creativity and commercial viability in your books?
Every day, they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that happened with me is that I knew I knew early on that 9 to 5 wasn't going to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
I did what I had to do, but I knew that what I can offer creatively can be a business.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. I had a hobby as a photographer several years ago. I kind of transitioned right after I left the newspapers into doing photography full time. That was a hobby that I said, you know what, I love this. I can make this a business. I created Chuck Brown Photography. I opened a studio. I started doing weddings. I started doing portraits. I started doing family photos, high school graduation pictures, all of those things because I said, you know what? How do I turn this passion into profit? And so everything that I do creatively, I see how it can work business wise so that I can continue to be creative and not just leave that for the sake of, oh, now I got to go work a 9 to 5. And then that means hour before to get there, hour coming back. Now I'm going to be up another 8 hours because this story is in my head. When am I going to sleep? So now with the books, the same thing with the film, the plays, all of those things that I'm working on, the same thing I did with photography, I figured out how to incorporate the business side of the creativity. And
Mm-hmm.
so, of course, with the books, I sell books.
Mm-hmm.
I sell t-shirt merchandise. Um, with the movies, we show them in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
So that's income. With plays, of course, you're selling tickets, you do things like that. So there are ways to do it, and you have to constantly think about it. I'm not the best in that area, but I work it. You know what I mean? So there are ways to do it that you have to be continually thinking about the business side of your creativity. So they talk a lot about Hollywood and show business. There's the show, and then there's the business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I admonish all creatives to think of it that way, because at some point you're in a situation where you're constantly waiting for somebody else to provide an opportunity for you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those opportunities don't come. But if
Mm-hmm.
you think about it in a way that you can control your destiny when it comes to your creativity, whether it's as an actor, a writer, an author, whatever it is, think of ways how you can get involved and do it where you can figure out how to monetize it. Now with the internet and TikTok and everything else, we have so many content creators that have found a way to use their creativity to make money. And so it's just important for us to think about it that way.
Oh wow. Um, can you discuss a book that you are particularly proud of?
Of course, of course. So I would say two books come to mind. Like again, all of them were for a specific reason and they were all important. So that doesn't diminish the other ones, but the two that I would point out, one is called Devil in the Mirror. And that deals with a lot of things that I was going through, including depression. And I share some of my own testimony about me looking into the mirror, and I saw more things that looked like the devil than I did of Christ. And I'm calling myself a Christian. So I called the book Devil in the Mirror because I wanted to share my testimony of overcoming depression and sharing how I got out of it and what things I did, what I read, what was I listening to, just really sharing that, and it was really personal for me. And so a lot of what came from it were those stories that I wasn't expecting as I was writing. For example, people that read it and said, called me and said, "Hey, you don't understand. I was gonna leave my wife the night I was reading your book, but I saw what you and your wife been through and y'all are still together. I can give it another shot." Or somebody says, "You know what? I was suicidal until I read your book. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm not even going through as much as you went through. I, I can make it. And so those types of impacts are why I identify that book and talk about its impact. Same thing with the dementia book because it shares those personal stories and I know it's helping people. So when people read it and they say, well, I had no idea, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at my diet. I'm going to talk to my doctor about what I'm experiencing. So those types of things, because again of the impact, are what's most important to me.
So, how do you handle writer's block?
I don't have writer's block. Uh,
Okay.
yeah. So and that's not to say I'm the the greatest writer or anything like that. But one of the things that I teach my writers is that you can control your writer's block. For me, I have several techniques that I teach writers on how to overcome their writer's block. But because I write so much all the time, it's not blocked. I might set it aside, work on something else, come back to it when I'm inspired. So it's not a blockage, it's just a shift to something else. But
Okay.
some of the techniques and tactics that I use with my writers is link up to what you're writing. If you feel like you're stuck in this particular subject, for let's say for example, you're writing a book about um, overcoming stress and you feel like you're stuck. Well, what do you need to reconnect to that material? If you're going to listen to some music that you're no longer stressed, it's going to clear that pathway for you to get back to writing that. Or maybe you need to set it down, go for a walk along the lake or something, come back, now you're refreshed. Listen to music that's going to trigger something that you're writing. Like there are several things that you can do to kind of unstick you if you're stuck. Um, but for me personally, I say I don't have writer's block because I never stop writing. No matter what, I don't stop writing. I might take a break. I might go to something else. I'm going to come back to it. Or if I feel like, I'm working on this character and this character isn't doing exactly what I thought he was going to do and something is missing. That is that assignment I told you about. I'll go to the mall and I'll just look at people. That character can walk like this. This character can dress like this. Now I'll go back and I'll apply it. So there are different techniques to help me in my writing journey, but I don't say it's writer's block or that I'm stuck. I just kind of transition or I'll completely set it down and I'll write a poem or I'll write a song
Hmm.
and then I'll go back. Or if something hit me, that's what I can do. I can make this character sing
Hmm.
because I just wrote this song.
Oh wow,
So
that's
I
cool.
find ways of connecting the different items.
Well, you know something. Now, just tell me, maybe and just listening to your definition, the way you define that. Tell me if this is the same thing
Mhm,
because, like, when my creative juices are flowing, I'm like writing like crazy.
mhm,
When it starts to slow down, then I stop.
mhm.
So because I stop for a while, let's say if it's like maybe about a week or two, I mean, then I come back to that. Does
Right.
that mean I had writer's block, or is it that I just needed to take a break?
You might just need a break. So it's
Okay,
when you have a block is when you can't do anything else.
okay,
Like there's something in the way that needs to be removed. So there's a blockage. And so if you just take a break, that's fine. What I tell a lot of people too is a lot of people no longer do outlines. I'm a big proponent of outlines.
so am I.
Because again, if you stop at point number 4, when you come back, there's point number 5.
Right.
You're not blocked. You know exactly what you're doing. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
Um, so now if you're creative and you just have bullet points and then you're developing something, you're developing the plot, or you're gonna add a plot twist and you just don't know what that plot twist is gonna be. Now you're trying to come up with creative ways of figuring out how am I going to make this plot twist work. That's different. Now you're in discovery mode. Now you're trying to find inspiration for that. But if I'm just completely stuck and I don't know what to do, then that's when you employ some of those other strategies to remove that blockage and get you that creativity to do it. And so, like I said, just that quick with me saying, okay, I'll go and write a song. Oh, now that character, he can sing a song that would lead to something else. So sometimes it takes just that one idea, that one concept that will get you over the hump. But if you need to take a break, by all means, take a break. Just know where you took the break at and what you're coming into. But don't make this mistake, which I bet you do sometimes. Once you go back to get started, you go back. You
Yeah.
reread what you wrote, two,
Yes.
3 paragraphs, a chapter, or whatever. Now you're editing that instead of continuing to write.
Yes.
So once you get to that point where you stop, you're going to stop again
Mm-hmm.
because you shut down the momentum.
Okay.
And so you don't want to shut down the momentum. You can always go back and reread what you wrote. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to stop that momentum. And so even if you got to take a break and you walk away, come back to the same place and pick up. Get that momentum going again, keep going. Now when you go back and you reread it, okay, if you want to change something, edit something, that's fine.
Okay. Oh, that's really. I appreciate that myself
Oh, for
because
sure.
I'm like, do I have writer's block or am I just
Yeah,
overdoing it? So I appreciate that.
no, for sure.
Um, what role does research play in your writing process?
Huge, huge on so many levels. So there's research and content. So let's say, for example, if I'm developing a character and the character is a mechanic, I need to research what a mechanic does. How does a mechanic work? What tools do they usually have? What do they usually dress like? What do they do before and after work? Like, that's research. Um, Anything that I do, research is involved, even if it's just from developing a character from scratch. So if I don't know who this character is, age, where they work, family, all of those things, and I'm building that, I'm still researching to make it work. If it's a topic, for example, with the dementia project, I had to do a lot of research because I just didn't know.
Hmm.
I didn't know that there were over 100 types of dementia.
What?
I didn't know. I knew dementia.
Right. I didn't know that either.
Yeah. And so once I understood that, I was like, okay, so what are they? How are they different? It becomes research. Now I can have a conversation with someone about these things, and that comes from research. Same thing if I'm creating, a TV series and I'm writing something, I want it to be believable. So I have to do the research to make sure the language is right. Make sure the clothing is right. Make sure, you know, if I can't say, this person is a neuro surgeon, and then I say, oh, they dropped out of school in 8th grade and never went back to school. It's like, okay, you know that there's additional schooling and there's residency and then there's all of these things. So that's what you try to do.
Mm. Um, how do you stay motivated to write?
That's easy for me. I have so many stories that I want to tell that I'll never get a chance to tell them all. So I'm motivated because I have these stories that I'm trying to tell. And then I'm also inspired every day by people, people that I know, people that I watch, mentors, heroes, sheroes. So I'm always inspired and motivated by other people. So to me, that's more stories to tell. And then I'm hoping that I'm doing the same thing for generations behind me.
So, can you tell us this? What advice would you give to aspiring authors?
The first thing I would say is start where you are and write and keep writing and keep writing. A lot of times we think we have to have it all understood. We think we have to know the font and the formatting and all of those things. We don't. The first thing we have to do is to write. Like, really understand what it is that we're writing and start writing. You can learn the other stuff as you go. And then I would say, don't stop, you know, create that outline and know where the story is going. Whether you're writing about yourself, are you going to tell your entire life story? Are you going to tell from high school to present? Are you going to tell whatever it is? Know what the story is, and then just write. Right. You can figure out all the rest of the stuff later.
We're gonna play a game. We're gonna play a word game.
Sure.
I'm gonna ask you a word, and I want to know the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
Also, make sure you remember the words.
Okay.
First word, book.
First thing come to mind is helping writers.
Create.
I would say me.
Love.
I would also say me.
People.
People,
Hmm.
inspiration,
Team.
a must.
Leader.
Um, Needed
Inspire.
all the time.
Movie.
Movie,
Hmm.
I have a lot that I want to do.
Woman.
Woman,
Uh-huh.
I would say women. All the women in my life, from my wife to my daughter to my mother, um, all the women that are important to me.
Feelings.
Feelings, um, knowing where to put them.
Of all those terms, which term stood out to you the most and would be the most important to you at this point?
I would probably say love.
Okay.
And the reason that I say that is because I often say I'm defined by love. And that's why when you said love, I said me.
Right.
Um, a lot of what I do is because of love. And what I want other people to experience is love. And so a lot of the things that I want to write and do and to have impact with organizations and philanthropy, it's based off of that love that a lot of people don't feel. And I think that if people understood and really felt love, it would make a difference in this world.
Wow. Yeah, those are some really I was listening to you earlier as we were going through the questioning process,
Hmm.
and I wrote down 10 terms that were relative to some of the things that you said, and that's where they came from.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah.
So
They're
go
all
ahead.
important.
So let's transition over to your filmmaking career.
Okay.
Can you tell us what inspired you to venture into filmmaking?
Um, I knew from when I started writing early on, and I don't even know how it became a thing, but as I wrote down, ideas and thoughts, or my crazy family that I love, but there are characters throughout my family, and I would see my uncle do something. I would hear something that my mother said, and I would jot it down, and I said, one day I'm going to put this in a movie. One day I'm going to put this on TV. And so those things became that seed from, preteen, like way back when. And the evolution of it came when I had the photography studio, as I mentioned, and I had two interns that were from the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. One of them was studying film, and one of their assignments was to do a short film. And so in the back of my head are all these ideas and thoughts. And I was like, hey, I've always wanted to do something. We can do it here at the studio. And so I pulled one of those ideas, wrote a short script. We did a short film. The film was probably 11 minutes long. And that weekend that we shot it was one of the best experiences of my life. And so I said, you know what? It's time to do more of this. And that was the precipice for me to really jump out there and do more films.
Wow. So, I mean, so from the time that you started making films up to now,
Mhm.
um, do you put a limit or have you set a limit for a number of movies that you want to make within your career or within your lifetime?
No, I'll never be able to make them. Like, because there are so many stories I want to tell. For
Mhm.
me, it's just telling as many as I can, and having as much impact as I can. So, for example, I have a film that we're premiering October 19th here in Atlanta. it's a romantic drama with a breast cancer theme. And so I wanted to be able to use this to let people know how important love is, how important second chances at love is. But I also wanted to include one of those areas of impact that I mentioned earlier. And so this one happened to be breast cancer. So I wanted people to be able to see this love story in the context of that. And so I try to do that with different ones. And a lot of those movies will include some type of impact with things like that.
So, can you share some key milestones in your filmmaking career?
Sure. I would say the most recent one is the dementia documentary, which we showed at the Essence Fest this year, which was huge for us. We've been taking that documentary around the country, and we've been seeing the impact that it's been having. So that's very important, to us. And then I would say another milestone is my very first feature film that won an award, and that dealt with campus sexual assault. Same thing, telling these stories that we don't often talk about, but then being able to be recognized and win an award for it, knowing that we're helping people and helping them through their journey.
Mhm. Oh, wow. Um, how do you approach the process of creating a new film?
Everything starts with an idea.
Mhm.
So it's whether it's a personal story or something that I saw and I wrote down. It starts with that idea and then it grows from there. It's just like you're planting a seed and you're watering that seed and it eventually grows to a huge tree. It has to start with that idea, and then that idea has to be watered, it has to be nurtured, and then it grows. And so knowing what the story is, I often think about the different steps in that growth. Starts with characters. It starts with the story. What are the plot twists? What do the characters do? How they go? And how do I want it to end? What do I want to leave people with? And so that's kind of the evolution of it. Sometimes it's a short process. Other times it's a little longer, depending on the subject, and then whether it's coming from a true story or not.
Okay. Um, what themes do you often explore in your films?
Yeah, most of them are things that are important to me or important to the people around me. There are a few common themes that we have with mental health, and now with brain health in general, which will be a common theme moving forward. But it's a lot of those things that have impacted my life, whether it's relationships, whether it's familial relationships, different things like that. But it's something connected to the people around me.
So, how do you balance creativity and commercial viability in your films?
That's a good question. Sometimes it's not one or the other or both, because some things I do just for the sake of entertainment. Other
Okay.
things, so my company Expected in Entertainment, we say to entertain, to educate, and to empower. So sometimes it's just for entertainment purposes.
Okay.
Sometimes it's educational. Sometimes to empower. But you look at the commercial viability of it as well to see if this is something I'm just going to throw up on YouTube just for people to see and learn from it, or is this something that I'm going to try to get on Hulu or something like that where I can monetize it. So you kind of balance those things out. Or if I'm going to do theaters, am I going to rent it out myself, am I going to get a promoter? You kind of balance those things as you go. But for me, the story is the most important thing.
Can you discuss a film that you are particularly proud of?
Yeah, I would definitely say this dementia documentary is one that I'm most proud of, in particular because it's here and now and it's still growing. So we've already traveled around the country showing it, and we're already lined up to do a lot more in 2025. And we're seeing the impact that it's having. We're seeing people are changing their lives and their lifestyle because of it. And that's what we want to do with all of our projects.
So, are there any current projects that you guys are working on that you can discuss?
Absolutely. So I mentioned the Permission to Feel and Heal series with God Sis just being premiered. So we are going to be doing more of those projects for God Sis and God Guys, and working on other projects um, in 2025. And then there are also different film projects that I'm working on as well. And of course, there will always be books involved somewhere because that's what I always do.
Um, how do you handle creative differences on the set?
So I think it starts from the top, from the director, the producers being able to make sure that the vision is clear. And then once the vision is clear, you kind of figure out how to bring that vision to pass. And so when there are differences, whether it's, okay, I think we should do this inside instead of outside, how do you resolve that? You come together with the people who are in control or in charge of that particular decision, and then you work it out. You come to a consensus.
Hmm. Um, what role does technology play in your filmmaking process?
Same thing, a lot. Now with AI, that's another wrinkle that we're looking at how it's going to impact filmmaking in particular, with writing, creating scenes, doing all of those other aspects of it. But technology is important. We've had new cameras now. Before it used to be film, now it's digital.
Mhm.
You have new ways of saving that footage on memory cards and external hard drives. That's technology. Now you are able to see what people are seeing while it's happening. So that's technology. So there are a lot of things that technology is important. It's making it easier for us to do what we do.
Wow. So, in that case, when you mentioned AI, do
Mhm.
you would you like have a specialist that particularly that deals with the AI, or do you and all of the members of your crew have to know what AI is about?
Yeah, so right now we don't use it a lot. It's one is kind of so new, and a lot of people are using AI to come up with their stories and write their stories.
Hmm.
As I mentioned, I have stories for days. So I have stories that we're working with, but now you're able to shoot different things in different locations that we might look at a little bit more.
How do you stay motivated to create films?
The impact. The fact that I know everything that we're doing is about impact, I'm always motivated and inspired to continue to do it, because there's somebody. I use the analogy. I don't even know if it's an analogy, but I tell my writers somebody is literally dying, waiting to hear or read or see what you're working on. And so for me, because I know what we do is about impact, I can't wait long before I do the next thing. I have to, because somebody needs this information.
Yeah, that I think that it's got to be like a core factor in just doing film in general,
Yeah,
because it kind of like when they say there's a binding agent, would you
hmm
say that that's like a binding agent to actually making everything complete and stick together?
for sure. It definitely is for me and the people that I work with as a core team, because they share that passion. Even if it's something that we're not working on together, most of those people have the same vision and mind to impact others. And so that helps us to inspire one another the same way. And then when we come together to work on something, it's that same feeling that we got to keep pressing forward.
Um, what advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers?
I would say find your story and tell your story. Same thing I said about writing a book. Don't necessarily think about all the bells and whistles and all the, proper things and understanding everything. Tell the story. So
Mhm,
people are now making movies on their cell phones.
mhm.
Shoot it. Tell the story. Figure out how to get the best sound, but do it. So get started so you can understand what the process is. Then you can perfect the process down the road. But the one thing that you don't want to do is not start.
Right. You know, um, When I first connected with you on LinkedIn and I read your profile,
Mhm.
all of these things were like really inspiring to me. And I was really, really proud to see somebody that looked like me that was able to do the things that you're doing, especially from your entrepreneur standpoint here of creating and finding expected in entertainment.
Thank you.
When you got to that point and you were ready to find this company, what were you thinking about when you said we're going out to incorporate this thing and we're ready to do it? What were you thinking about?
Well, at that point, when I officially incorporated, I was working for a company that had just shut down, and I was doing interviews, looking for jobs. I'm qualified in 90% of what I applied for, but I couldn't find, a job. I'm like, I know how to make a sandwich, and Subway wouldn't even hire me. I know how to put a can up on Walmart's shelf, and Walmart wouldn't hire me.
Oh man.
School districts wouldn't hire me. I was trying to do PR. I was trying to whatever. I was just trying to find a job. And so
Mhm.
at that point, I was like, you know what? Let me officially start the company. Let me put my passion, my hustle, everything behind it, and then make it work. And so that's what I did. And I realized it wasn't going to be easy, but I did it, and I continue to work hard at it.
Oh wow. So what motivated you to start this was to just do your own thing after losing your job? Is that what motivated you to do this?
I was already doing it, kind of loosely saying this is the name of the company. But at that point, it was like I was doing it after doing everything else. And so at that transition, I said, you know what? I'm going to, officially do it and put the work in to make it happen.
Mm. Can you share some key milestones in the company's history?
I think one is the consistency that we've been able to do projects, that we've been able to help people, that we've been able to create classes, that we were able to have people who wanted to be an actor but didn't know where to get started, that we put people into films and now they've gone on to do, amazing things, just from us creating an opportunity. And so, beyond us telling those stories, we're also creating opportunities for others to do what they dream of doing. And then they go on from there.
How do you balance your creative pursuits with your responsibilities as a CEO?
Yeah, that's sometimes difficult, because the passion of some of the things that we do aren't necessarily tied into the dollars that are needed for the continuance of the company. And so the creativity that we have to do to be able to still do those passion projects, help people get in the door, all of those things now have to work in conjunction with running a company and being able to effectively do what we do. And so you do have to change hats sometimes, spin it around and see where it lands for that day. But knowing that at the end of the day, it is a business.
So let me ask you this. So as CEO, and also having to be the decision maker over all the projects that are produced, released, and things of that nature. Have you ever taken the time to have a part in any of your films?
Yes, absolutely. So I tell people sometimes my actor friends let me act like an actor. um, so I took a class, and the purpose of me taking this acting class was for me as a director to be able to know how to deal with actors. And
Mhm,
so it was a learning thing. But one of the things that I found is that it challenged me, and I
mhm.
love to challenge myself. And so now it became learn acting, do acting, see where it goes. And so I have been in several of our projects.
Oh wow. So so with that, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced as a CEO?
Um, the income, finding where that next money is coming from, whether it's a project, whether we're writing grants, you know, who's on the team that can help and what areas. So it's kind of balancing the next step, you know, because none of our projects have won an Oscar yet. We don't have Sony Studios, MGM behind us. Nobody's dumped $50 million and said, "Hey, go make a movie." So it's balancing those things as we're developing and growing until we get to that point.
So, how do you stay updated with industry trends and best practices?
Well, being a former news guy, I'm always tapped into current events. And so that's the same thing within the industry. Knowing what's happening now, knowing how AI is being used, knowing what things are coming down the pike, whether there are new cameras and new things, whether there are tax breaks in different cities that we want to film in. So staying connected to all of the industry publications, the trade magazines, things like that, they are very helpful in us planning for the future.
So, how do you guys set your budget? I mean, has there been a time where, for a project that the budget was off and you had to get creative with it, where you had to make it work? How does that work?
Every single project as an independent filmmaker becomes that. So a lot of what we write within our teams, we write around what we have. So that helps with the budget. But then you always run into some situation where you still have to figure it out and make it work. So if I know we have access to your house, I'm going to say, okay, we can shoot this to make it look like it's somebody else's house. We just figure out ways to make it work.
Hmm. Um, what strategies do you use to build strong relationships with your team and clients?
Yeah, I think they're both the same in that we are one of our mottos is to build a family.
Mhm.
And so if I treat you like you're my family, we have that relationship. We're not just building for one particular project. We're building for multiple projects. We're building for the future. And so it makes it a little bit easier if I need you and if you need me, because now we've formed that relationship. So it goes back to that love that we were talking about. I don't want to just hire an actor. I want to build a relationship with this actor. So a lot of the people that I have worked with, we've done multiple projects together because of that.
Mhm. So like when you was just talking about, establishing the relationships with your crew and your teams and so
Mhm.
forth. How do you guys transition that over into maybe extras or people that you're looking for in the community? How does that work?
Yeah, fortunately for us, we've built enough of a good reputation that once we start working on something, because of how we treat people, people want to work with us. And so if I say, hey, we're shooting this scene, it's a scene at a church and we need 30 people. Within that team, we can pull together those 30 people because of how we've treated people, because of people that want to work with us. I can't do enough projects for all the people that want to work with us. So we try to maintain those relationships to make it easier.
Mhm. So how do you measure the success of your company?
I think the biggest thing in measuring success for us is on the ability to impact people's lives. So we don't necessarily build it based off of the amount of money this project made or the amount of views this project had on YouTube or anything like that. We base it on what was the goal for this particular project. If the goal was to educate people about domestic violence or to leave people with information on where to go if they're in a domestic violence situation, and we hear those stories that people say, you know what, I left this abusive relationship because I saw your film, that's a success for us. And so that's kind of how we measure what we do.
Well, has there ever been a point in time in your career that you felt like you made the wrong decision?
No, I feel like I might have learned some things later than I wanted to, or I didn't have the help I thought I would have, but never questioned the decision to do it because I know my purpose. I know
Mhm,
what I'm supposed to do. I know what I'm good at. So
mhm.
now the rest is building those other pieces, learning the things that I don't know, connecting with the people who can help. But making a decision, absolutely the right decision.
Wow, I love that. Can you discuss a particularly challenging project and how you handled it?
Sure, that's an easy one. And I would say the best example of that is the film that we're premiering October 19th. We shot this film 6 years ago,
Oh, wow.
and we had so many issues that came up with the project that anybody could have said, you know what, skip it, move on. You'll never be able to get it done. And we said, no, we're going to get this project done, even if it takes us 6 years. We had to stop shooting. We had locations, closed down on us, but we had to figure it out. And so I'm proud that we were able to persevere and get this project done.
What role does innovation play in your company's approach?
Um, a lot because things are continually happening. And, like we talked about with the changes in technology, those things that if we don't embrace those things, we're going to be left behind. Think about Blockbuster. Blockbuster got left behind because they didn't want to change with the technology. And
Mhm,
so with our company, it's the same thing with the cameras that we use, the lighting that we use, the recording devices, the editing software, now implementing AI and so many other things as well. We have to be, at least up to date, but then on the cutting edge of a lot too.
mhm. What are your future plans for expected in entertainment?
So we are definitely growing in all of those areas that we are currently in. We want to grow even larger and faster with more films, TV shows, podcasts, radio networks, anything that you can think of. We want to be able to do it, but we want to grow it to a bigger level. Not necessarily to compete with anybody because what we do we feel is unique to what we do, but we want to do it on a larger scale for a bigger impact.
Well, you know something, I think for all the work that you guys have done at Expected in Entertainment, I can say that the impact and the influence on the community, it sounds like it's been really, really positive. And I gotta say that you probably have got to be one of the nicest people to work in entertainment.
Thank
Because it doesn't seem like you're flustered a lot, and it seems like you kind of like just work and you're able to adjust on the fly. Is
you. Yeah,
that correct?
it's correct because I know what my purpose is in it. So I don't get swayed by the challenges because the purpose and the goal doesn't change.
Mm,
So it's just a matter of figuring out how to get through it. And I come with love, and I try to make that thread consistent so that when there are challenges, now I look at it from the standpoint of what are we trying to do to make sure this goal is met, that this impact is had. And so, yeah, there are ups and downs, there are challenges, but it's how do you approach it and how do you deal with them? And so I would like to think that because of my experiences and the people that I've been able to work with, it makes it a little bit easier. It's not easy, but it makes it a little bit easier because I don't lose focus of what the goal is.
well, I'll tell you this. I'm definitely honored and proud to have you as a guest on our show, and I
Thank
hope
you.
that you come back
I'd love to.
because I do think that as creators and for the things that you do, they're really, really good things, and I hope that there are people out there in the community or people that are watching in general learn a lot from
I
the things
appreciate it.
that you just put out because I mean not many of us are actually giving back to the community or trying to
Mhm.
do things to help build the community. But I think with you and what you're doing with your production company, it does a whole lot, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. I
You know,
appreciate that.
because
Thank
I
you for having me as well.
thank you, because I too am here in Metro Atlanta, and I know that we have a lot of us
Mhm.
that are trying to do some things, but we have a whole bunch of us that are not.
Yes.
So it'll work.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to leave with our audience as we wrap up?
Just to encourage everybody who is a creative in particular, create. Like, just do it. Like, whatever it is. If you want to be an artist, draw something, paint something, do it. I think you have to start somewhere, and I think that's the problem for a lot of people is starting. Don't try to have it figured out. Just get started, because if you have a boulder at the top of the hill and you push that boulder, it's going to create its own momentum once you start. And so sometimes the hardest thing is the effort and the energy it takes to start before that momentum can happen. And so I just want to, hope that people are encouraged, motivated, inspired to just do.
Well, I thank you for your time, and I think for those people that are watching on the YouTube channel, please follow Mr. Brown. Whether you see him on social media or you know about his company, please follow him and support him as much and as best as you can, please.
Thank you.
For those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel, please hit the subscriptions button and the notifications button so you are able to catch each and every show that we have, and you can go back and watch them as many times as you'd like. And again, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Brown, for spending some time with us. And
Thank you.
again, I hope we have you back on the show. And I want everyone to have a